Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Jess Rhea. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a Brazilian person with light skin and hair, and today I'm wearing like a black blouse. I'm an assistant professor of data science and public policy, and I also co-lead the Digital Technology for Democracy Lab at UVA that's co-sponsoring this series with us. And together with my colleague Yasmin Kurzi, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the DTG Lab as well, and works as an assistant professor of law at FGV Law School in Rio, we organized this Gender and Tech Online Talk series to explore how gender shapes and is shaped by technologies with perspectives from the global majority. And today we host the 50th session titled Data Work and Political Participation. And this conversation aims at examining how data labor, from content moderation to annotation and invisible care work, structured digital economies and democratic participation. And we are really thrilled to welcome two outstanding speakers today. We have Milagros Miceli and Tatiana Diaz, whose work explores the gender dynamics of digital labor, data infrastructures, and political participation. We are very lucky to have them with us here. And before we begin, just a few reminders. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for questions. You're welcome to write the questions in English, Portuguese, Spanish, or French. We'll do our best to translate and to help. We have the automatic closed captions on for you, if that's helpful. And this recording will be available in the next few days on YouTube in our YouTube channel. So thanks again for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to Yasmin Kurzi, who will moderate today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess. Hi, everyone. My name is Yasmin Kurzi. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a Brazilian and Latina woman with light skin and brown hair, wearing a white t-shirt today. I'm really happy to be here and moderate this discussion today. As Jess mentioned, this series, the Gender in Tech Talk series, seeks to center feminist, queer, and global South voices and perspectives in debates about technology, democracy, and human rights. Today's session looks at how platform labor, often invisible, feminized also, and precarious, sustains the digital infrastructure of participation and governance. We are honored to welcome two brilliant speakers today with us. So first, Dr. Milagros Miceli, who is a sociologist and computer engineer, research lead at the Distributed AI Research Institute, DARE Institute, and director of the Data, Algorithmic Systems and Ethics group at the Weizenbaum Institute. She is the PI of the Data Workers Inquire project, studying labor conditions and power dynamics in outsourced data work and their impact on machine learning data sets. Her work spans worker-led research, labor organizing, and the intersection of critical data studies and data activism. She has been recognized as one of the Times 100 most influential people in AI and as one of the 100 most brilliant science by the city of Berlin. And Tatiana Diaz, who is an executive editor at the Intercept Brazil and a Pulitzer Center AI Accountability Fellow. So Tatiana mainly covers technology, human rights lobbying, and politics, and the intersection of these areas. She led many journalism projects, such as the rise of techno-authoritarianism, how surveillance technologies emerged during Bolsonaro's government, the Trump of the tropics, and the business of facial recognition companies in Brazil. So at The Intercept, she has worked in some of the most impactful stories of recent years. She was a finalist for the Gabo Prize in 2023 for the coverage of the shocking case of an 11-year-old rape survivor who had her abortion denied by a judge in Brazil. In 2020, she won the 36th Human Rights Journalism Award and was nominated for the One Media Award for her story about former President Jair Bolsonaro's plan to occupy the Amazon. So let's begin with Dr. Milagros Miceli. Milagros, if you want to please share with us your presentation for today. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that incredibly generous presentation and for having me today. I think you can see my screen now. Yeah. So what I will be doing today is maybe provide an introduction to data work, which is the topic of today's session. It will be not a long presentation because we want to use the time to share and discuss and maybe, for mutual learning, that would be amazing. So I don't want to speak a long time. I just want to say everything that I will be showing today starts or is part or is are the results of this project, Data Workers Inquiry, which is a community-led, worker-led research project in which we invite data workers to join us as community researchers and experts. The expertise is with them. This is what we try to prioritize. They lead unique projects in their own workplaces. That means that they come up with research questions that they consider to be important to them. And they investigate those themselves, of course, with the support of us. When I say us, I mean me and also this wonderful team of academics, researchers, data workers also, and also students. We support the data workers who join us. We provide training and we provide support, but it's their research. And they then develop outputs to showcase their findings. Those are the outputs and the pieces that you find in the repository under data-workers.org. Those outputs are not, academic papers or, the type of output or presentation of findings that we are used to in academia, but they're rather pieces that aim at appealing to a broader audience, especially other workers. So we have animated videos, documentaries, podcasts, reports of various kinds, a zine, a comic, and I'm probably forgetting some format. But before I show you any of that, I just want to briefly show you the most important part of our project, which are these 28 data workers on 5 continents, 28 and counting, because the project is not done, it has not finished. We continue with this research. And these are the 28 data workers who have put a lot of trust in us, joining us. Some of them, as you see, have a pseudonym. They don't have a picture. That is because workplace retaliation and it's very hard in this space, as we will discuss. I'm sure we will discuss later on. So some of them can and are brave enough to show their faces and their names, but others cannot do that, cannot afford that privilege. So but before we jump into, showing you some of those pieces to discuss how data work is structured and what are the conditions of data work, I want to do some defining work because I'm first and foremost a sociologist, so definitions are important in my field. What is data work? What am I talking about when I talk about data work? Well, I'm actually naming that what other colleagues have called micro work, click work, ghost work. So it's the labor that goes into producing data for AI and also ensuring the correct functioning of AI. This includes tasks, as you see, that we have classified broadly in these 4 categories. The first 2, the ones on the upper side of the slide, have to do with tasks that happen before the modeling, and the second part is rather tasks, especially verification, algorithmic verification, that is controlling that the system works according to the plan, and that is done by data workers usually. They happen after the modeling. And impersonation, it can happen at any moment. It can happen when there is a model already working and that model breaks down. So humans need to intervene and pretend to be AIs, or it happens when there is no model, there is no AI system, but it sells to say that they have a system in place. So it sells to say that they have automated, and that those are the cases in which workers are instructed to pretend that they are an AI systems, like in cases of chatbots where it's actual people talking to you and you think it's a chatbot. This type of work, data work in general, is typically outsourced when it is done at scale. It's outsourced through platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk, like remote tasks, Prolific. If you're an academic, you might know Prolific. And it's also outsourced through what we call BPOs, which is short for business process outsourcing company, like the infamous Sama or Sama Source in Kenya. In Europe, there's also a strong presence of companies like Majorel, like Telos Digital, which is a Canadian company. So all this to say it is outsourced. It is outsourced in the sense that it is separated. It is typically separated from the work of the modeling, right? So, and that separation is on the one hand very real and very physical, in the sense that when it's outsourced, data work is not done in the same companies where the engineers, where the data scientists are the ones who develop the algorithms, just to put it in a way. The data work is not done in those companies. It's not done in the same buildings, and it is also not done in the same countries. Data work is outsourced to places mostly located in the global south. And as we will see, it's located to the margins, to communities, to especially vulnerable communities within the global majority. And the separation is also very, very much discursive too, right? When we talk about the model work we tend to think of that genius, visionary engineer, also very much connected to very specific ideas of masculinity, located in Silicon Valley, who had this brilliant idea, this lone wolf who developed what they develop in solitude, only with their genius. We hear about the $1 million salaries that these people receive. And in opposition, when it comes to data work, we only hear about how we don't hear much. This is work that is hidden from the public eye normally. But when we hear something, we hear how this is disregarded as low skill, blue collar, or even minor, right? Like words that we academic use to name this work, like micro work, also kind of give that idea that this is minor or small work. So to talk about the labor conditions and to give you a broader idea of how data work is structured and done, actually, I will refer to direct accounts from the research done by these data workers, these 28 data workers that have joined us with the data workers inquiry. And here, I also want to issue a trigger warning. We will not, or I will not be only be talking about economic and labor-related violence, but also there will be accounts of gender violence and sexual violence against gender minorities and children. So please be advised that this is going to be discussed. So the first thing that characterizes this work, as any other type of platform-mediated work, is the instability of income and the uncertainty. This is a screenshot from a video, from an animated video produced by a data worker in Venezuela called Oscarina Fuentes, who just discussed how the level of uncertainty that characterizes this work, and how that makes her sick not just mentally, but also with physical symptoms. What she also discusses is how you never know when a task will come up, if you will make enough to pay rent or to buy food. You can never plan for the future. And also she discusses how there is also a lot of unpaid time, the time that it takes workers to find a task on the platform, every day praying that there will come a task that pays enough, that is worth their time, that they are able to do, that is according to their expertise. The time that it takes them to read the instructions that are in many cases very long, several pages of a PDF, always, or in most cases, written in English for workers who not always speak English, like Oscarina, who doesn't speak English. And also, in many cases, they need to pass a pre-test to be able to access the actual task. Now, in BPOs, in these companies, the situation is not really different. The workers also, have to deal with this instability and this uncertainty. This is a part of the comic produced by Willington Shitawa from Kenya, who tells about the short contract, the issue of short contracts in these companies, and how he once, and this is a real story, got a 4-day contract. And this is very common. We have seen it repeatedly. But beside all this uncertainty and unpaid time, there are instances in which there is rampant wage theft, where workers don't even get what they work, even in instances in which they get to work, they don't get paid. Let's see this video. This is a blog produced by Yasser Al-Rayes, who is a data worker in Syria, and who tells us about one of those instances, or it happens to him live.
Something crazy happened to me here. As you can see here, I finished all my tasks. Here is my name in Arabic, and here. Both my supervisor has accepted all of them. But unfortunately, if you move to this page, you will find out that the client rejects all of them, and now I have to repeat the work from the beginning.
So Yasser, one thing that I forgot to mention is that I tried to put in each one of these example a QR code that links directly to the piece in question, in case you want to, because these are just small snippets. If you want to see the full piece, please follow the QR code. So as you see here, this is an example case of what workers have called mass rejections. Mass rejections are instances in which the workers do the work to the best of their ability. They send it back to the requester, and the requester says, oh no, this has not been done according to my quality standards, so I'm going to reject this. And when they reject, they don't pay. And in these cases, you see how powerless these workers are in many cases, especially when it comes to deciding what counts as data and what is well done work. In the case of Yasser, and it's worth mentioning, Yasser works for one of those PPOs. Not only he has done the work according to the best of his abilities, but also the work has undergone reviews by 2 other workers who have okayed that work and have said, yeah, this is ready to be sent to the client. Yet the client claims this is not done. This has not been done well. This is no good work. And the word of the client is worth more than that of 3 data workers. And this is totally arbitrary, right? And just for you to know, this happens all the time. This is a very prevalent issue in data work, mass rejections. So as I was telling you before, and as Oscarina argues in her animated video, this causes all this injustice and uncertainty causes so much stress that the workers get sick. Mental health issues are a workplace or an occupational hazard in this space. Other populations have other health issues. In the case of data workers, it's really mental health. And of course, this gets even worse when it comes to workers working with disturbing or violent content, like Mo Fatokinyi, who you see on screen, who work through one of those outsourcing companies in Kenya, in this case, SamaSource or Sama, as a ChatGPT trainer. He was working through that company, but working for OpenAI on training ChatGPT. And this is what he says about the work and its consequences.
So the effect were across the board. Everyone who worked on the project experienced this kind of mental challenges, especially sexual content can really affect someone's emotions and how you think and how you see people. Bearing the fact that we were reading text about rape, violently raping people, and some people were being killed, it hit me so much as a person, as an individual, because after working on this text, and my behavior started changing, and by that time I was married to a young, beautiful lady. And then when my behavior started changing and screaming at night, waking up, not sleeping, she started questioning my behavior. But with our Kenyan culture, you can't just explain to someone that you are working on sexual content. They might think that you are doing something illegal. So I kept this to myself, and my wife could not cope up with my change in behavior, and she decided to go.
There are two things that I want to highlight about Moffat's testimony. I mean, his testimony and many of the other testimonies that we have on this documentary could be the topic of many, many hours of conversations. But the two things that I want to highlight here is how this work, affects entire communities. What Moffat says about his wife leaving is it's not unique. Like, we have heard many, many data workers telling us that their spouses have left them, or that they have encountered conflict with their kids, that the kids don't talk to them anymore, that they have isolated themselves from friends and families, and so on. And this is related to the second point that I want to highlight. When he says, in our Kenyan culture, we don't talk about these issues. People might think I'm doing something illegal. This is very prevalent, not just in the Kenyan culture, but really it is very hard for many data workers, regardless of their location and cultural background, to talk about these issues. There is a lot of shame, there is a lot of people won't understand, but also there are NDAs, non-disclosure agreements in place that keep these workers or forbids them to talk about, from talking about what they do, for whom do they do it, what is the company that hires them, who's the final client, what is the type of content or data that they work with. So they cannot name any of these things. And this makes the isolation of these workers really unbearable. It's as Ranta, who is a migrant woman working in Nairobi as a content moderator. She says, well, it would be a mistake to just blame it on the content in itself. It's the content, yes, but it's also coupled with the pressure to meet these targets. In her case, it's like 50 seconds to review something that is horrible, make a decision about that content, whether it needs to be deleted or not, compose herself, and then move to the next horrible piece of content. All that within 50 seconds. So it's the content, but it's also the pressure to meet these targets, and also the isolation that many workers face because they cannot talk about what they do. So all these three elements together is what's making mental health issues an occupational hazard in this space. Now, despite these terrible conditions, data workers often don't have the option to leave. In fact, companies are predatory. They really, as I was telling you at the beginning, they outsource to the global majority, but specifically to places where unemployment is high, where opportunities are scarce, and also they target specifically vulnerable population, and they sell that as philanthropy. So they would tell you, oh, we try to have a positive impact on refugees populations, or we try to bring jobs to single mothers in India. We are so nice that we do this. Here, Maureen, in this video, she tells us very, very clearly. Let's hear her out.
When we were first initiated at Summersource, he made it clear to us that one, Summersource employs the unemployable. That is why their target population is from the slums. So if Kibera, for example, Madare, Kariobangi, Kaongware. Actually, the funny thing, when you're applying to join Summersource, they have a drop-down for those targeted areas. So in case you're not from that area, you'll not be picked to work at Summersource. So you have to either pick one of those, even if you're not from that, but that is the main thing for you to be considered to join Summersource. So once you're at Summersource, one, they believe you are illiterate, because if you're unemployable, that means you're not needed by any other company. So they're doing you a favor, actually. So in their mind, they know, one, you're illiterate, two, you're vulnerable, three, anything thrown at you, you're going to accept. Because coming from the slum anyway, someone who comes from the slum, anything thrown at you, you just accept and you say thank you.
And of course, migrants are, one of those populations that are in a vulnerable situation, that they would just accept anything thrown at you as Maureen puts it, and especially when they are refugees, like Ruqayya Al-Hamada. She's a refugee from Syria living in Lebanon, and she tells about how the difficulties to get a broader work permit make many refugees victims of this exploitation. And of course, when it comes to disadvantage and when it comes to oppression, gender minorities have it worse. Ranta from South Africa, who is a migrant woman herself in Kenya, has told the stories in this scene that you see on screen, has told the stories of 11 women who endure really terrible working conditions doing data work in Kenya as migrants, and the inability to leave, the impossibility to leave because they depend on the job to keep their visas and to send remittance home, especially the case of these two women who were sexually abused by a co-worker, and the company didn't help them at all. So I think I'm at time. I wanted to talk briefly about data workers organizing around mass rejections in workers' councils, just to bring hope to this grim scenario, and to say these are just examples of what we have supported through data workers inquiry. I'm not saying this to claim these efforts these workers would have organized with or without us, but just to say we academics, we can do better. And this is the topic of this paper that we just published this week. And with that, I say thank you.
Thank you so much, Milagros, for everything that you have been doing and for turning visible all of these stories that are marginalized and made invisible by these companies and their really terrible practices of labor and human rights. So thank you so much, Milagros. I'm sure that we'll have like many questions to follow up on your presentation. Now we're moving to Tatiana. Tatiana, please start when you are able to. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, Des, Milagros. I'll start by saying that it's a challenge to speak after Milagros with a reference for my research. I interviewed her for one of my stories. I'm a Brazilian woman with light skin and brown hair, and I'm wearing glasses and a black shirt. I'm going to present. Can you see my screen? It's working?
Yes,
okay.
It is.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm a Brazilian journalist with over 20 years of experience covering technology. Today, I'm the executive editor at Intersect Brazil. And in 23-24, I was a fellow of the Pulitzer Center's AI Accountability Network. It was in this fellowship that I published a series of stories about data workers who train AI in Brazil. Here today, I'm going to talk about the main findings of my reporting, a little bit about Brazilian context, and of course, the gender perspective. Here are some questions that guided me during my research for this reporting. I tried to figure out why Brazilian people are so interested in data work. And also, I wanted to discover who is benefiting from this industry, like who are the final clients, and how do these tasks look like? As a tech reporter, I've always been interested more than in technologies themselves, in how they impact society. I had already investigated stories on precarious work in tech industry, but it was when I learned about the work of Brazilian psychologist and researcher Matheus Viana-Braz that I discovered this new frontier of precarious work, which many people call micro work or ghost work, as Milagro said. Matheus is a Brazilian psychologist who, together with Antonio Casilli and Paola Tubaro, did an extensive mapping of data workers in Brazil. He reviewed important issues of demographics, payment, and work routine, also showing how this type of work impacts workers' lives and mental health, as Milagro said. Here are some relevant data about Brazil. Data workers are young and have high education levels. Almost 40% of data workers have completed higher education compared to just 20% of Brazilians with formal employment. It's important to say that this type of work exploded during the pandemic, fueled by economic crisis and increase of unemployment among the population. And in Brazil, the data workers are mostly women. It's important to highlight that this is a Brazilian particularity. In Brazil, 64% of data workers are women, and in other developing countries, according to Mateo's research, the rate is about 25%. Today in Brazil, just for comparison, the number of women in the tech industry is like 39%. But in data work, it's quite the opposite. While women are a minority among developers in the tech industry, as Milagro said, they are the majority in this type of poorly paid and precarious data training work. Why? Well, any mother knows how difficult it is to get a support network and continue the work routine after the birth of a child. The data shows that men tend to use data work as supplementary working on the platforms, platforms after work hours. Meanwhile, the majority of women who work training AI don't have another job, and they log into the platform every day looking for new tasks. We cannot separate this reality from precariousness and the lack of an adequate support network for women. One person interviewed by Mateus said that with one hand, she would breastfeed her baby and with another hand, do the tasks in the platform. Another very important finding is about low wages. The average salary of AI workers in Brazil is less than $2 per hour. The average monthly income of workers, counting all their sources of income, is about $300 per month. Also, the algorithmic management of tasks is not very transparent. Completed tasks can be rejected without explanation, and workers are left without payment. It's also worth noting that workers spend a lot of time looking for new tasks and reading materials and training PDFs, and this work is not compensated. The research also addressed psychological effects of this work routine, such as fear and anxiety and exposing to disturbing contents, as Milagros showed. And the research showed that workers consider content moderation to be the worst job. When I, as a journalist, had access to this information, to this research, I wanted to understand what the tasks look like, and especially who were the major contractors, the final clients. Who are these people working for? I started trying to understand which were the big tech companies that hired the large data work platforms like Appen, Telos, and OneForma. I realized, looking for the excess traffic share by country data, that Brazil was already one of the countries with the highest number of visits on those work platforms. Still, it's very difficult to identify who the contractor is for a particular task. What's on the screen is the description of one of these content moderation tasks on Appen platform. This is the information that workers have access to. As you can see, there are no details about who the final client is. Workers only have access to the generic description of the task, which is published with a nickname, in this case is Wolo, and they don't know exactly who they will be working for. And once they agree getting the task, they have to sign the NDA. So they cannot talk about the job outside the platform. My goal then was to try to discover who are the companies who are behind these tasks. This is not an easy work because this information is not public. And this opacity is not by chance. We know that alienating workers from the purpose of their work is not only a form of control, but is also a way to reduce the accountability of the contractors. So I started collecting information from the workers in groups and interviews to map these tasks. My idea was really to create a database to understand who the contractors were, the payment, the difference between countries, and the nature of each task. This was like months of work, which involved collecting information in different ways: groups, scrapping platform pages, forums like Reddit, and YouTube videos. It was by listening to workers and following the routine in the groups that I discovered that the WOLO project, which I mentioned earlier, was from Meta. It is a project to fact-check posts and ads in Meta platforms. And these, in the screen, are real tasks from this project. The first post is an ad for illegal gambling. The second is a political post criticizing President Lula. Both appeared in the task queue for Brazilian workers. In WOLO project, workers had exactly 1 minute and 41 seconds to do this fact check and confirm whether the content was real, false, appropriate, or inappropriate. In total, they needed to do 40 fact checks in 1 hour. For each post, they received the equivalent of 80 cents of dollar. And this job was done without like training or clear guidelines. The workers just receive a poorly translated PDF archive. There was also a lot of pressure to complete the tasks, and any error was punished. I realized that many workers were unsure how to proceed and even used ChatGPT to help with classification. In other words, what was supposed to be a qualitative human analysis to improve data quality could actually contribute to make it worse, all because there's no training, clear direction, or even time to do a quality assessment. Well, workers had to evaluate all types of posts, including gambling ads and adult content, violent content as well. But for me, what was especially shocking was discovering that they also had to check information of critical public interest. Last year, Brazil was hit by terrible floods that left more than 180 dead and affected more than 2 million people. And at the time, disinformation and fake news became a serious problem that disrupted rescues and government actions. And Meta was under pressure. Meta then declared that it was making easier for fact checkers to find and classify relevant content because speed is especially important during critical events like this. But I discovered that it was the workers from the WOLO project who were checking posts like this one. This is a post from a far-right influencer discrediting the work of the press during the floods. This post ended up in the moderation queue of a Brazilian woman working in the WOLO project. In the worker groups I followed, I learned that moderators were responsible for fact-check critical content like this. And this gave rise to the first story in the series. This story showed that precariousness of this AI training work has real consequences, such as inconsistent fact-checking and disinformation impacting the final quality of the database being generated by workers. I had Yasmin commenting on this story as well. We learned that with some investments, for example, in payments, training, and more autonomy and time for workers, it would be possible to improve results. But this didn't seem interesting to Meta. Here are other stories from the series. In the platform Proletariat, which included an interview with Milagros, I showed how the artificial intelligence industry profits from unprotected digital working class in Brazil. In another story, I showed how X uses data workers to moderate extreme content like pornography, violence, but there's much more to be investigated. Here, I bring other examples of tasks that deserve more investigation. These are real job ads on platforms like Appen and OneForma. One of them, the worker must record videos imitating security cameras. In another, they must record videos of children and teenagers. In another, they can even sell LGBT theme videos they have on their devices. And this type of task raises serious concerns beyond precariousness, also about privacy and workers' dignity. And it raises the question, who is hiring this and why, and where does this data collected by workers go? We need to remember that we in the Global South are the workforce behind AI. Many researchers such as Antonio Casiri, Julian Posadas, and my Brazilian colleague Rafael Groman have pointed out how the AI industry takes advantage for our social vulnerabilities to impose an extremely exploitative work logic. And looking at this map, where is Latin America in the global AI chain? This map shows that discussing AI is also discussing colonialism, extractivism, and inequality. And it doesn't affect people in the same way. As Mateus' research showed in Brazil, this industry exploits precisely those who are in the greatest position of vulnerability. The main motivators that lead workers to perform data work are the need for money, of course, time, flexibility, and a preference for working from home. One of the workers I talked to, for example, had just had a child and couldn't work outside because she had no one to leave the baby with. And she found an opportunity in digital work. And it really was. She worked in the Wolo project. But she earned much less than she deserved. And she became hostage of the algorithm control, having to work at night and with her baby to complete the tasks with uncertainty. And this is a work system with a high level of control. Workers are exposed to suffering and anxiety, as Milagro said, but there's a whole propaganda system telling them that this is actually freedom. And it's especially cruel how they target women. Here, for example, you can see a series of videos from an ecosystem of influencers who sell this dream of freedom with special focus on mothers. To conclude, I want to say that I was very inspired by the work of Karen Rao, Julian Posadas, Antonio Casili, Milagro Micheli, Rafael Groman, and Mateus Viana in Brazil, who are pioneers in this research that truly empowers workers. I also wanted to share this quote from Julian Posadas, which inspired me in this search for an approach to cover AI from this Brazilian Latin American perspective. I think we have this strength, which is this workforce, a creative and inspiring force. And we have to recognize this is actually a power. And I believe that the whole of journalism is to break the magic around AI and hold accountable those who should be held accountable, the big companies that take advantage of our social vulnerabilities for exploitative practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. This presentation was excellent. And your English was just fine. No need to worry about that. So basically, I think journalism and academic research, they are both super important, essential, actually, to shed light about these realities due to the precariousness of the workers, and of course also the negligence of authorities that basically don't investigate properly, don't take adequate measures also for to prevent these issues or to actually address these situations. So may I ask you both, Tatiana and Milagros, what have been the main challenges for you in investigating this topic? Do you face like any obstacles from the enterprises themselves? How do you see this? Thank you so much.
Should I go first?
Milagros, do you want to start?
Okay, I can start. Yeah, of course, you always fear being sued by a company, by one of those big tech companies, and just being a very small fish attacked by a shark. Of course, that's a real possibility. Another real possibility is, of course, bringing more danger to the workers we work with. In our case, that's, I think, a very real possibility, and that's something that we try to be very mindful of all the time. The security of the people we work with is our first and foremost priority. But then another thing that not often gets discussed, I feel, is the mental health issues that this line of work can bring also to researchers and also to journalists. There is such a thing that is called third-party trauma, right? And listening to these stories, often in a position in which you cannot do much about that, in a position in which you cannot really change the material conditions in which many of these workers find themselves, can be very frustrating. And of course, I'm talking about myself, but I also worry about, more junior scholars or students that work with us in the team. And sometimes, they start reviewing a piece and they say, I cannot do this. This is too much. So, and we understand that. And for that, we also had to implement measures of inviting a trauma therapist to join us, not mainly for us, mainly for the data workers who joined us, but also for us, because it was hard.
Thank you so much, Milagros. Tatiana?
I have a similar experience because I had a really hard time getting people willing to be interviewed because everyone is so afraid of like breaking the NDAs. So I tried like for months to get people willing to be interviewed. It was really, really hard. And it's not by chance. This like the industry is really opaque and this work chain, the big tech companies, they want to be hide behind those like nicknames of the tasks. So and this was the lack of transparency in the whole chain was really, really challenging for me and for my colleagues that investigated other kinds of data work. So these two things, the lack of transparency and the difficulty of like breaking this fear barrier to actually access the workers. I think this.
Thank you so much. I think this is really important for people who want to investigate, like to have like tips and hear from you how you have been doing that, to both to start the research and also to get the best practices, I think, on how to do that. So we have some questions here in the Q&A feature. I will start with Yushnish Sengupta's one. So Ushnish wants to know more about the Canadian companies such as TELUS that Tatiana mentioned that she also investigated it here, operating it here in Brazil, but it also operates in Canada and other countries as well. And if it is involved in global data work outsourcing, and also any links are greatly appreciated. So do you have any comments on the Canadian scenario as well, like the companies that were operating there? Do you have any ideas of that?
I don't remember if I have data about the Canadian scenario, but I can check in my spreadsheet because I have tons of tasks in there. But TELUS, I don't remember exactly, but I think Telus is currently serving Google or Apple. I have to check it. But it's a really huge company that hires workers all over the world and has such a huge clients. I have to check in my spreadsheet, but I'm sure about that. It's a huge
Thank you
company
so much,
that
Tatiana.
okay.
And
Yeah,
Milagros?
adding to that, so beyond Brazil, TELUS has an enormous presence in Europe, serving mostly Meta with content moderation services and with terrible work practices. We work very closely with the Workers' Council at TELUS here in Germany, in the largest office that they have in Europe, which is in Essen, Germany. And with them, and the workers have achieved wonderful things for their colleagues in Essen, Germany, and for others in other places in Germany. But for example, in Barcelona, where also Telos was doing content moderation for Meta, earlier this year in April, they fired 2,000 workers or more than 2,000 workers just from one day to the next. The workers were notified that they were not longer needed. Um, and the funny thing about this case, and also a very similar case in Brazil, in Berlin with another company, is that the workers are always told when this happens, the workers are always told, oh, we now developed an AI that just is going to replace you, so we don't need you anymore, which is only half of the truth, because of course there is a lot of automation happening and being developed in these spaces, but the presence of the workers, of human workers, is still needed. So what happens is that the companies now outsource to other places where they can pay even less. But this is not the part that they tell the workers. They tell them, well, we have an AI, we don't need you anymore. So yeah, that's TELUS.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
I just
Milagros.
checked. Sorry, I think it's because I just checked it, and Telus, the big client of Telus is actually Google.
Google now. Yeah.
Mhm.
So to Ushnish, also we are adding some resources to our report that we're going to release next year after the series ends. So don't worry, because we are basically covering the questions in the Q&A as well. And we can add some materials about the Canadian scenario on the report. So we have other questions here. Let me get from this one is from an anonymous attendee, but I found it super interesting as well. So this person recently gave a presentation on Eugenia Ciapera's work about how online misogyny functions to punish women for being visible while still generating profit for platforms. In your talk, you have shown how women doing this outsourced data work are exploited in ways that stay invisible. Do you see those as connected? Meaning, are the women who are attacked online and the women doing this hidden labor both being controlled by the same economic system, just in different roles? Do you have any comments on that? Thank you so much. I think we can do the same order, Milagros and then Tatiana. Thank you.
I think that's a very interesting way of putting it. And the answer, I mean, the short answer is yes. And the answer is in the question. Yes, they are both groups are exploited by the same system. Of course, that is patriarchy. It is, yeah. But I think there are a couple of things here that could be mentioned around the invisibility of especially female data workers, because as Tatiana was saying, this is a type of work that is largely done by women, and that is also has to do again with the prevalence of women doing care work and the need to stay at home hidden from the public eye, and how this work allows them, many of them, to do both, right? To serve the home and to earn money doing this terrible work. So also, like when we talk about this dual load, we need to think of these workers doing this type of work. And they remain more hidden than their male colleagues, even though hidden and hiding is a general topic when it comes to data work, because yeah, most women are doing this work from home. So those are my thoughts.
It has to do with the feminization of poverty in general, right? Tatiana?
I'm completely contemplated by Milagros Michel answer because it's patriarchy, the problem. But I would like to highlight this propaganda system that I mentioned, because in this these influencers like selling the dream of they sell the dream of work with AI, work with technology, work with like innovation, and this is not the case. Like they sell the dream like the people data work would be like developers, like this kind of this kind of hype in this working with technology, but it is not the case. It's not the same nature of work. So yeah, that's it.
And I can imagine that there are already tons of ads also to get people to do this sort of work, as there is also tons of ads created by AI for human trafficking and other like really terrible situations. So I'll get another question here in the chat by Sasha. So Sasha's thanking you both so much, and also asking to share more about the methods you use to try to understand where workers are located. So Sasha thinks one of your slides, Tatiana, had platforms website visits by location. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So could you share a bit more about the methods also?
Yeah. To get a location, I just looked into traffic data of the websites of the platforms. This is easy. There's a bunch of platforms you can check, and to the data about the tasks I collected directly in the platform's website, because in the job post had the location. So I tried to organize the information organizing by location. So this information is public. So this is how I get the location.
Thank you, Tatiana. Milagros, do you want to add something on the methods to do this research?
Yeah, because we do qualitative work. To us, we don't do this at scale, looking for specific locations. We have done. I have done this in the past in other projects, following same tactics as Tatiana has just mentioned. In our case, with these projects with data workers inquiry, is people just joined us, and it's word of mouth. So like it spreads like that, and then they are located they just tell us where they are located. But that's a different type of work from what you're referring to.
Yeah, so there is a really difficult question here, and sometimes as a professor, I always get these questions from students as well. And it's always difficult to answer this, but the person is asking that sometimes students push back, saying that it's better to have this kind of job than to have no job. So what do you have to answer for that?
I can
Thank you so much.
I can go first because I always get this question. People think it's such a gotcha moment, and it is. Of course, no, I'm not going to discuss this. And I think nobody here, I don't want to speak for Tatiana, but I think nobody here is talking about abolishing this work. I've never met a worker who would tell me this work needs to be abolished. And I would fight anyone. I actually fought someone once who would tell me, I'm a leftist and this work needs to be abolished. And I was like, no, that's not what the workers are saying they want. So nobody is saying this work shouldn't exist, and nobody is discussing that it does bring jobs to places where there are no jobs. What I personally am saying, and what annoys me about all this discourse about how these companies are so nice to bring jobs to these populations, is that it's never discussed how many billions they are making on the back and on the labor of these workers. And I think That's the part that is so annoying to me. The part that is so annoying to me, or so unjust, to put it in a way, is that these companies, they are always, when it comes to salaries, they don't go to those places just because they are nice and decent people. They go to those places to pay as low as possible, to get as much as possible, and to have a captive workforce who doesn't have another option but to work with them, no matter how exploitative the conditions of the labor. So those are the reasons. And what we are arguing here is not whether it is good, it is better to have a precarious job than no job. That is out of the question. But actually, we should elevate the discourse to discuss whether it is better to have a good job than a terrible one. And I think that's the point.
Thank you so much, Milagros. Tatiana, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the women I interviewed, she had just had a baby, and she had to make money. So how can I say something to her? Of course, she needs this job, but she deserves better. She deserves it, like to have more a more safe safety in her work routine. She deserves to be better paid. She deserves to recognize that she's not like performing only micro tasks. She is working for a multi-billionaire industry. She is working for Meta, actually. So she deserves to earn like a Meta employee. So this is for me. This is why for me it's so important to connect the dots, connect the workers with the big contractors, because they have to recognize they are part of something much bigger than those tasks in the screen.
Yeah, and it was Tarleton Gillespie in Custodians that of the internet that wrote that content moderation is actually the main asset of the platforms. Like people go to one platform, use more TikTok or more Meta's platforms because of the content moderation, because of the efficiency of the recommendation systems and etc. So the content moderators, they are basically the essence of the platforms. They should be profiting more from that and being safer conditions because of the relevance of their tasks in the companies. So we have another follow-up question, I think, on this subject by Yoshnish. If there are any examples of AI development companies, that are ethical in terms of data work, like is there any best practices going on? Are there companies that have like better practices than others? What do you think? Thank you.
Okay, I will follow the order. Yes, probably these are companies that nobody knows. Of course, there are projects that are very mindful in the ways in which they treat data workers. But those are not the big tech. They don't rank among the big tech companies. I don't know, just to give you an example, there's a company who is who a colleague of mine is the CEO, who is the company is called The Sun. They produce language technologies, and they have been very, very mindful in the ways in which they treat data workers. They have consulted with us, but also with data workers themselves to see what can be done. And one finding, and I think this also confirms a line of my research that I have been pursuing for a while, and that is that this is not just only about being decent and being nice to people or being mindful and ethical. This is also good for business. What my colleague reports is that these workers who are treated better, who are actually treated as colleagues, who are given participation in the decisions surrounding how to produce a data set, those produce better data than actually outsource anonymous hidden data workers somewhere else through a company who are lousily paid. So yeah, just saying, it's good for business.
Thank you, Milagros. Tatiana?
I really don't know if are there any like ethical companies, But I know that like Appen, for example, says that it has made some improvements in the work conditions, which I don't know if it's true or not. Appen, I know that launched a new work platform called CrowdGen. I don't know if it's better or not. I think Milagros knows better than I. So I really don't know any like ethical data work platform.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. So we have time, I think, for one more question, and I just see Jamila Venturini popping here in the chat. Jamila is the director of the Derechos Digitales. So how do you see the impact of the current ILO discussion on platform economy on this sector? I understand they are not yet targeting data work, but do you see any potential positive impact on these workers? Which other ongoing global or local policy process do you think is important for the field? Thank you so much, Amila, for being here with us.
Can I get this first? Because I'm
Okay.
going to talk about Brazil. Oi, Jamila. I'm going to talk about Brazil specifically because when I started to research for my stories, it was in the point that the Lula's government had promised to regulate platform work. But in Lula's proposal, it ended up that there is no mention for data work. Like this subject was completely ignored by government. And so this is so frustrating. And even in the AI bill that has been discussed in our Congress, there is no mention about this subject. So we had a lack of regulation. The workers are not protected by AI law, by labor laws. So I don't know if the OLA resolution had some impact, but now in Brazil, there is no discussion about regulating this kind of work.
Thank you, Tatiana. Milagros?
Very briefly, adding to that, I think that we had I always talk we. I'm in Argentina right now, and I don't know why am I the whole time talking as if I was in Berlin still. I think it's being used to that. In Europe, there was a similar issue when it came to the Platform Workers Directive, which was approved, which passed last year. And there was also there were a lot of worker groups invited to that discussion, luckily, and we of course celebrated that the Uber unions, the delivery drivers, and everyone, were invited to that discussion. Everyone but the data workers, and it was lucky that one MP in the European Parliament thought of this group and invited us to contribute expert testimony. And we said, no, we are bringing the data workers themselves. It was very hard to bring the data workers or find data workers who could actually feel safe. Again, visibility is also a privilege. Who felt safe enough to go and speak in front of the parliamentarians. But it was a successful experience in the sense that then the law in that regulation piece took data work in. They included it. They name it in the regulatory piece, and that was a big success for the data workers and also for the other workers to know of the existence of data workers and content moderators who have such a decisive role also in the organizing of many other worker groups. For example, one of the Uber leaders told us, the data workers, like, oh, so you are the ones banning my posts when I post something that is very political on Twitter. And they were realizing about those connections that, of course, the content moderators don't have a say on what gets banned and what not. But it was funny to see that also that type of connection. And we are, just briefly, we are hoping that with the ILO process, there will be some sort of space. We are certainly pushing for that, for data workers to be heard in that context, but it's also hard.
Thank you so much, Milagros. So just to wrap up, Thank you so much for being here with us. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be surrounded by such like important experts in the field. And I just have to thank you. I just wanted to thank you for accepting our invitation, and I hope we can make this conversation ongoing, and we'll send you the report, of course, for you to check your codes as well. And thank you for your contribution to us here today. Thank you. I'll move to Jess.
Oh, thank you so much. This was amazing. And I'm sure like we learned it so much. And I really appreciate the work that you do. And you're like sharing your time and knowledge, expertise with us here. So thank you. And for everyone, we'll continue the Gender in Tech Talk series. The next session is on November 2nd. And it's trans-inclusive technology governance. And we will have Blair Tardfrost and Mari Hicks. And thanks to the overwhelmingly positive support that we have, thank you. We will continue the series in 2026. At first, we were not planning to, but I'm happy to say that like we will. And please subscribe to the DTD Lab newsletter if you haven't already, so you can stay up to date and access the recording. So thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Have a nice day.